the visible spectrum and the audible spectrum are super slim on the entirety of the electromagnetic field, electromagnetic spectrum. So why is it so far fetched to you that there are things that exist on either side of that spectrum?
Yes.
Because we know anybody that has an animal, cat or a dog, like they oftentimes stare off into space and as if they're looking at something or someone.
Hello, and welcome to an episode of Confessions of a Quantum Channeler podcast. I'm your host, Joanna, and joining me today is a very special guest, Dexter Morton, a scientist with over 15 years of experience in the medical science field, particularly in the biochemistry and research. Now, Dexter is here to give us perspective on some of the unusual phenomena that I've been experiencing, like seeing particle of atoms and the crystalline codes of creation and other strange phenomena, some of which began after a strange frequency occurrence. In this episode, we'll delve into Dexter's scientific background, learn more about his work, and hear his expert opinion on the possible scientific explanations behind these phenomena. So, whether you're a skeptic, a believer, or just curious, this conversation is sure to be both enlightening and thought provoking.
I have a degree in biochemistry. I worked about 15 years, almost 15 years now, in the medical laboratory science field. I do a lot of biological studies. Um, Prior to starting my journey, as far as starting my business with Chocolate Wonders, I was actually going to go to school to get a PhD in neuroscience. So my journey really started with the math and sciences. I delved very deeply into quantum physics. I've always been very fascinated with the way that the brain works, which is really what led me into spirituality, into metaphysics and psychology. And yeah, I just think those things are super interesting. One of my favorite things about the brain, actually, is the way that we perceive reality. I came across this article several years ago that really expressed how we all perceive reality differently, and we just think differently, and that's why our individual representations or perceptions can just be so varying. Like if I say apple, some people think of the word apple. Some people think of a physical apple. Some people might have the taste of an apple. And then
Hmm.
some people might say, what kind of apple, red or green? So shows where our thought processes are.
Thank you, Dexter. That's beautiful. I love the way they explain it. That's why I love to do this podcast with you, just to kind of, have a real raw conversation about, some of the things that I've been seeing. And when we had a first chat, the podcast that I was on with you, it was just so, I mean, you're just a beautiful person, but the way that you kind of explained it in your scientific terms, considering your background, that's why I want to merge the two, because seeing these otherworldly phenomena and having you to kind of like translate it in a sense is what we need right now. Like the world is changing. We need now to take these otherworldly experiences and explain it and prove it that it is real. Like, orbs and ghosts and spirits and the things that I see, it's time to prove it. It's time to really step into that, that other reality that we're really all living in. So I just want to kind of explain just a few of the things that I see, and I just want to get your take on it. So I'm going to just explain. So one of the things that I have been seeing for now over, I think, 13 years, right? So, I had an event happened to me, and it was the event that had happened was December 12, 2012. Now they were talking about this shift in consciousness, right? Something's going to happen, the Mayan prediction, and I didn't take anything, from it really. Like I was just like, okay, that's cool. Nothing really for it. But so on that day, I mentioned to you that I had this frequency went into my ear. I heard this frequency, the sound. It sounded like tuning forks, and there was no parties going on. There was no gongs playing, and it was a very quiet place that I lived in. So this frequency that went in my ear, both ears, for a few minutes, very strange, right? But still, I was like, okay, well, whatever. Like a pitch went into my ear. Right after that, I saw a green orb floating around my room. Again, just strange scenario. And then after that, about a few months later, half a year later, I started seeing what I just call the crystalline codes, the codes of creation in a sense. This is what I was told. And I still see them every single day of my life from that point on. And I even try to debunk it myself, right? Thinking I'm crazy. I'm seeing things. I went to the doctor. I got my eyes checked and my health. And I see this every single day. So the way that I see it, I'm just going to say and then ask you what your take on it is. So what I see is, like I said, I've been seeing it every single day. And it's like looking at something in this reality that doesn't belong. These crystalline codes, it looks like a crystal that cascades down, right? Cascades down every few seconds and then continues cascading down. Kind of like these codes in a sense. They're see-through. It looks like a crystal, an actual crystal you could see through. And inside of it, it's just like, it's a big formation, but I only see a part of it. And in it, it actually loops, intertwines, and at each intersection, there's circles. And inside those circles, what I've noticed the long time that I've been seeing is sacred geometry. And, to me, the explanation was that it's basically my reality that I'm seeing and I'm creating in real time because these codes change. When I observed it as a scientist, basically I've noticed that they change. So my question for you is, in your just like background is, no, just looking at it, in a scientific basis of it, just experiencing, let's say, the sounds that I heard, right? Like the tuning fork. What is your opinion on hearing this otherworldly phenomena? What can it be, and how can you kind of like explain it? And also these crystalline formations, that I see. Is there any maybe scientific, I don't know, backing to it, or your opinion on that?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I do want to start with before we dive really deeply into this is that there isn't really a whole lot of scientific research when it comes to the spiritual and metaphysical field. Now, when I say there isn't a lot, there are companies that do research, such as the field of noted sciences. There's the Monroe Institute, and there's also the Heart Math Institute. So those are really big institutes for anybody that's interested in seeing where science is with it. And there's also what do you call those? Anyway, there's a field of study out at the University of Arizona that actually studies consciousness. So I want to start there. I want to go all the way back to what you said about with the Mayan calendar and everything back in
Yes.
2012, and then we work our way forward.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
starting with the Mayan calendar, that was mostly about the calendar itself just ended. So it wasn't the fact that we were going to shift into something, because we are in a sense, right? But the Mayans just did their calendar up until their full calendar year, and their full calendar year was extremely long. But they actually went off of the celestial calendar, so when the planets themselves become aligned and in tune, and that's their full calendar year, which is like 3,600 years or something like that. Now, what tends to happen when this occurs, everything in our universe is alive. So while this is happening, our planet itself is going through its own stage, its own shift in its evolution. And us, the beings on that planet, are just really along for that ride. So when people are talking about this shift that's occurring, well, that's the shift. The shift is actually the planet going into another age of its own existence, its own enlightenment. And we, the beings, we actually have the choice in saying that, yes, I would like to go with planet Earth or Mother Gaia, whatever you want to call the planet, or I want to stay with the older frequency. And not that one is good or bad and one is lower or higher than the other. They're just differences, right? So it really, with that being said, it makes sense to me that the first orb that you saw was green, because the next level of our stage and enlightenment is actually love, going towards the fourth chakra. So we moved out of fear, we've moved out of guilt and shame, which are the lower three chakras. And as a society, we're ready to start really embodying the upper chakras. So before we get there, we have to shift into that fourth chakra, which is shifting into that fourth dimension. So we're transitioning from that lower third dimension to that fourth up into the fifth dimension. And this is dimensional. This is dimensional space, speaking more of a spiritual, metaphysical sense, not necessarily in a physical sense. Now, when we think about dimensions. In the physical sense, we think about the length, height, and width of things, and with that next dimensional apparatus being time. Now, time itself, the way that I like to explain time is that time is a static field. You can't necessarily move forward and backward in time because everything that exists is right now. So when we start looking at time, it's just really these lines that we kind of see. So when you're saying that you're seeing things that kind of look like these see-through nodes, these see-through cords, what you could possibly be seeing are not necessarily just downloads, because a download would be something that's directly going into your mind, into your spirit, into your body. But think of it more as we have clouds now that store information, and imagine that that cloud of information is linked to your cell phone, and your cell phone has a cord of energy that links to that cloud. That's actually how frequencies work from your phone to clouds, right? So there's actually a cord. So the cords you're seeing are just those little beams of information, and then you can choose to tap into one beam or another. Now, being that time itself is static, and time, and when I say static again, it doesn't move forward or backward, it just is. We perceive it as moving forward because that's how we experience this existence in a linear form. But time truly isn't linear, which is why things blink in and out of existence in your third eye, in your mind's eye. So you could actually see, once you get a high enough frequency, high enough resonance within yourself, you can actually start to see those chords. And when you start to see those, you're most likely seeing the more divine ones, more positive, and you're seeing things. When you see those crystalline structures, you're seeing more of the Christ consciousness, that Christ energy. And when I say Christ, I'm not necessarily talking about Jesus Christ. I'm talking about the crystal. So it's actually an energetic field, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you were talking about the nodes that cross, I wish I had. Where's my pen and paper?
It's okay.
So talking about the nodes that cross, right? Do I have an empty page in my notebook? There we go. So if time, point A and point B, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me see this. So we have point A
Mm-hmm.
and point B, and that's just one timeline, right? Now imagine that there's another timeline that runs perpendicular to that. Then that's where you get that cross point,
Mm-hmm.
right? So these are just two timelines. Or you could look at each timeline as an individual person, or you can look at each timeline as a pathway of events. Well, where that focal point is, where that crosses, that's where you're going to have like a fixed point in reality. And when things become more fixed like that, the structures themselves become more complex. And what does a complex structure look like in a 3D or 2D sense? It looks like geometrical shapes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing that I find really fascinating about geometry is that when we perceive geometry, we mostly look at it in two dimensions. So we look at it on a flat sheet of paper, but it would be more accurate to think about it in a three-dimensional sense. So it's not actually a square. What we're looking at is a cube. And then when you start looking at that same geometric shape in the upper dimensions, it starts being able to move in and out of itself, and that's where you get shapes such as like the tesseract. So I skipped a piece that I wanted to cover. So one thing that I wanted to cover was you talking about the ringing in your ears and seeing the bright light. So as you start to raise your vibration, your spiritual vibration, what does that mean, right? So when we raise our spiritual vibration, what's really happening is we're becoming more in tune with the nature around us. A lot of us put a lot of toxins into our bodies, and I don't just mean food and drinks, but we watch a lot of things that really aren't good for our psyche, and then we carry trauma, we carry generational trauma, and our minds are on this loop of trauma and sadness and hurt and grief. When you are able to get rid of all that through either meditation or some type of therapy, being healthy, exercise, when you truly start to clear up your physical body, your mind starts to clear up as well. What happens when you have a clear space and a clear mind, you can hear the energy around you. You could even, not even from a spiritual sense, you could literally hear electricity in a light bulb.
Mm-hmm.
So you could take that a step further, walk outside, you can hear the humming of the wind. You can hear the birds chirp before they say anything. You're truly in tune with nature and the energy around you. So that's actually what you're hearing. What you're
Hmm.
hearing is the frequency of life. And when you hear the vibrational frequency start to shift, as you know, when you hear it, it kind of goes and it kind of goes up. It's actually your body becoming more in tune with the frequency. So sometimes it'll go up, sometimes it'll go down, and sometimes it's in the left ear, sometimes it's in the right. And it's really your physical being becoming more in tune with the spiritual and natural energy around you. So as you start to raise in that frequency, you become more in tune with nature. So too are your abilities with communing with nature. And what that looks like is seeing things that are brightly colored, bright lights. One thing that I find fascinating before we move on
I just love you
is
explaining it. You explained it so well.
thanks, I'm sorry. So, but did you know that about 200 years ago, there were certain colors, not even, I think also like 100 years ago, but there were certain colors that humans didn't really perceive,
Yep. Hmm.
and it was only until we start to shift into more awareness that we're able to perceive more colors. The thing
Hmm.
is that I find so fascinating, and when I bring this up to my scientific friends, a lot of my friends are in like med school and getting their PhDs and blah blah. So like when I bring this up to them, and we talk about entities and spirits and things existing on different planes, and I'm like, well, the visible spectrum and the audible spectrum are super slim on the entirety of the electromagnetic field, electromagnetic spectrum. So why is it so far fetched to you that there are things that exist on either side of that spectrum?
Yes.
Because we know anybody that has an animal, cat or a dog, like they oftentimes stare off into space and as if they're looking at something or someone. And we all have had the experience of walking into a room and feeling as if someone is looking at us, feeling as if someone is standing there. And that's just us being more in tune with that. And it wasn't until the past few hundred years that we kind of lost that in our culture within Western society. Because there are still a lot of cultures that teach this, that talk about this, that preach about how there are some people who are just more in tune than others. And I would also like to say that this isn't something that's special to a group of people. It's not just like priests and monks that do this. Everyone has this ability. Some people are just better at it than others. That's just like everybody can do math. Some people are just better at linear algebra and calculus than others. But anyone can work their way up to that skill level.
Yep. It's so true. Like, even when you were saying about hearing the pitches, it's like, animals, like just animal, the animal kingdom, we don't even know to what degree, like, let's say fish, we actually don't really know to what degree they could actually sense different things. Dogs could sense different energies, and cats as well. And it's like, for me to say these things that I see, it's like, I stand in what I say because it's real and it's true. And I've seen this for over 13 years. And it's time for me to speak up about it because we are raising vibration, as you said. And, it's time to prove what I see so we could help, humanity evolve, right? Like you were saying, because releasing that fear and everything else. So I guess, I don't know, I'm just like an old soul. I feel that I just came here to kind of just speak my truth and speak what I see so people can understand that it is real. And I'd love to do a scientific study on this one day with either you or just scientists to really explain what I'm seeing. But I love the way that you explained it. Thank you so much. I just love listening to you.
Thank you for joining us today on this incredible journey of exploration. And a huge thank you to Dexter Morton for sharing his invaluable insights and helping us bridge the gap between the scientific and the spiritual. His perspective on the unusual phenomena that I've been experiencing, like seeing particles of atoms and the codes of creation, has been both enlightening and thought provoking. Now, if you're fascinated, as I am, by Dexter's work, be sure to check out his amazing products at chakrawonders.com. I'll link the website below. Also, don't miss his podcast, Onion Soup, where he brings together brilliant minds to explore the intersection of science and spirituality. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember there's always more to discover beyond what we can see. Stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next episode.